Hello folks. Okay, well, I want to talk about human-computer interaction today. So, giving a really short introduction to the idea that we need some decent way to make sure that our system interacts with the user in an effective fashion. And I sit here recording this as I fight over and over and over again with my recording software. So, it's a particularly sore point right at the moment. Let's see, what did I want to get into? So, again, the idea is we need some suitable way to have our program, our software, interact with the people using it. So you have to think about how that interaction should feel, should proceed from the user's perspective, from their point of view. What are their goals and priorities when they're using the software, as opposed to what kind of things do I think it would be cool or easy to do for when I'm developing the software. So there's lots of things to consider there. You want to think about the user resources, right? What do they have in the way of CPU power, in the way of bandwidth? What can I do that's going to be practical from an interface perspective for the user, right? Something, coming up with the fanciest idea in the world doesn't help if it's constantly freezing or glitching on the user. So we want to think about the resources that they've got available. We want to think about the environment in which they're going to be using the software. Right? If you're designing software that's going to be used in a vehicle, that's going to be different than software that you're going to be using in the cockpit of a plane, or the software that you're going to be, the interface that you're going to be playing with. If this is a game on my phone, or if this is a game on my PC, or if this is a game on whatever my favorite gaming platform is, you want to think about where they're going to be using it, what kind of conditions they're going to be using it in. Are there lots of distractions around? Is there lots of noise where they're going to be using this? Or is this on a factory floor someplace? Is it in a quiet office someplace? What's the lighting like? All of that is going to have an impact on what we do with our interface. Is it going, if we're using sound as cues, are they going to be able to hear it? If we're using different fonts or different colors, how is that going to look to them? Are they actually going to be able to see the subtle little shading that we put in to indicate something? Are there going to be too many distractions going on for them to be able to catch something subtle that we've done on the screen? Right? So you're thinking about the environment and the conditions that are affecting the user as they're using their product. Right? You also need to think about how the nature, the sequence of your interactions impacts how the system is going to behave. So things like preventing errors and whatnot that we'll come back and talk about a little bit more. And we're trying to think about the best way to have our system interact with the people to reflect all of this. Right? So there's a lot to consider here. Now you'll get into this in way more depth in a course like 310, the HCI course, but we're just going to kind of introduce some of the concepts here. Some of the things that you want to think about are the way that your software communicates with the user in terms of just levels of formality. Right? If you've got something that's banking software, you might want to be a little more formal and proper than if you've got software that's a game of some kind. Right, so you're thinking about the correct level of formality, the use of humor, the correct use of language for the situation, for the user that you've got in the situation that they're in. You're trying to make sure that as you go through this, the user never feels like an idiot. They never feel lost or confused. They're never wondering what should happen next. You want to make sure that things are clear for the user at all points. At the same time, you don't want to drive people crazy by having the sort of baby step conversation all the way through. If you've got a power user, for instance, they don't want to be constantly reminded of all of the different things that they could do next. Right? They just want some easy mechanism to quickly pick the thing that they want to do next because they know what they're doing. Right? So you've got this balancing act as well of the different levels of user to play with. You might want to think about suitable metaphors for your design. If you want something that is going to I don't know, if you want to use a phone interface as the metaphor for some piece of software, that might be a consideration. Or if you want to use the sort of driving a car metaphor, where you've got a steering wheel and brakes and clutch and whatever else might be in there, right? You want to think about what might be a suitable metaphor, something that the user already understands in a different context that you can use as a way to guide them through how to use your software correctly. Again, you're trying to find a good balance between supporting new users and guiding them, and supporting the power user who already knows exactly what they want to do and they just want to do it as efficiently as possible. And you want to think about when you want to use audio cues versus visual cues, analog versus digital, right? What's the appropriate way to display things? Right? What are the pros and cons for each different situation? So there's a lot to think about in terms of how you're communicating information with the user, to the user. So you've got two sides that we want to think about here. We've got, if you like, the design side, where we're thinking in an abstract sense, what's the best mechanism for communicating with the user? And then there's the practical applied sense, where we're saying, okay, how do I actually implement that in the language or tools that I'm working with? So the first thing you want to do is thinking carefully about how your system is going to interact with your users, right? What information you're trying to communicate and what's the most effective way to do that, and then thinking about the graphical components, the actual interface elements that you might use to do that. And so you've got the two sides of it there. And most of the kind of design side we're going to leave for 310, and I just want to introduce for the moment a couple of the sort of graphical elements that we might want to play with, all right? Just some of the programming side of things. And of course, we've got all of the testing that this adds to it, right? If you've got an interface with lots of complex elements, then you need a way to test that they're all actually showing up correctly and they're all actually behaving correctly, which adds a whole new layer of complexity to your testing. Right? So you want to make sure that the behavior is actually technically correct, everything does the right thing and is in the right places. And you also want to make sure that this makes it effective for the user. So usability testing, if you like, where we're going to see if what we've created really is practical, really is suitable for what the user is trying to do. So you've got, again, a whole slew of different considerations to deal with. And again, we'll play with some of the GUI tools and GUI components, specifically, of course, with Bash and C++ this term. So we'll look at Zenity as a tool to use to create GUI elements for Bash scripts, and we'll look at the GTK library for creating some GUI elements with a C++ program. But we'll get into those next time.